What's the point of knowing the truth if you don't live by it? Our minds can come up with any ideas they want, and our hearts can feel all kinds of things. People are unique and see things in different ways, which can make life feel messy and confusing. There are some truths that cannot be argued. No matter where they're from, scientists all see the same facts when they look at reality objectively. This has been discussed over and over, so I won't dive too deep into it. Instead, I want to focus on what it means to actually live in alignment with the truth. So, what are some basic, undeniable truths? They're pretty straightforward. We live on a small planet, a tiny dot in the middle of the vastness of space. That's the truth. There's no debate about it. Earth is round, and we have photos to prove it, floating through dark, empty space. Our planet is just a tiny dot, and each of us gets to be here for only a short time. Those are two simple truths. We're on a small planet in the middle of nowhere, and each of us is only here for a short while. Maybe that's 80, 90, or even 100 years. But remember, Earth has been here for about 4.5 billion years. That's hard to grasp. To put it in perspective, if you tried counting to 1 billion, just 1 second at a time, it would take you over 31 years. Now imagine 4.5 billion years. Earth has existed for all that time, and we're only here for a brief moment. So, what if you lived in a way that acknowledged these truths? That Earth is a tiny planet spinning in endless space, and you're only here for a handful of years? How might that change your perspective? And here's another truth. We don't truly know where we came from. People may believe they know, but belief is different from knowing. There are all kinds of ideas. Some think about reincarnation, some about higher planes of existence, but these are beliefs, not truths. Truths are facts we can all see, backed by science and reality. Now think about how small Earth really is. It's so tiny that 1.3 million Earths could fit inside the Sun. And the Sun itself is just one of 300 billion stars in our galaxy. Our little Earth is spinning around that Sun in this massive universe, and we're just here for a blink of time. What meaning does any of this have? None. What importance does it hold? None. And that's exactly where we need to begin, with the truth. Imagine if the whole Earth blew up into tiny pieces. Sure, a few nearby planets might change their paths a bit, but beyond that, nothing would really change. Think about it. There are 300 billion stars in our galaxy alone. And that's only one galaxy out of 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. Now, let's look at what kind of meaning you want to give to your life here. But first, let's get some perspective. 1 billion is a huge number, and there are 300 billion stars in our galaxy. And these stars are spread out incredibly far from each other. For instance, the closest star to our Sun is 4.3 light years away. To understand that, imagine a beam of light speeding around Earth. Light can circle Earth 7.5 times in a single second. If that beam of light kept going at that speed every second for 4.3 years, that's when it would finally reach the closest star. And that's just the nearest star. Now picture this. There are 300 billion stars in our galaxy, and they're each separated by vast distances like that. Beyond our galaxy, the closest major galaxy to us is Andromeda. If you wanted to get there, you'd need to travel at the speed of light 7.5 times around Earth per second for 2.5 million years straight. And that's just one of 2 trillion galaxies out there. So, where does that leave us? Earth is tiny, and we are even smaller on Earth. These are the simple, unavoidable truths. Former Vice President Al Gore made a movie called An Inconvenient Truth, but this perspective is the ultimate inconvenient truth. Our egos don't like to think about it. We want to believe we're significant, that we matter in some big way, but these truths can feel like a shock. Some of you may be having a whoa moment just thinking about it. So how do you live with these truths? What does it mean to live in line with reality? It means accepting that we want to matter in a universe where, on this vast scale, we don't. We want to be somebody. Ram Dass, the spiritual teacher, even wrote a book called Becoming Nobody. But most of us don't like the idea of becoming nobody. We want to prove ourselves, to feel important. Why is that? In the end, we're here today and gone tomorrow, barely taking up any space. An ant might mean more to Earth than we mean to this vast reality we're describing. It's hard to accept, but it's true. In the big picture, our lives don't hold cosmic importance, and that's where we need to start. True spirituality doesn't begin with our personal beliefs or our ideas about what life should be. It begins with an honest look at what life actually is. Here we are, sitting on a planet in the vastness of space, and each of us will only be here for a short time. And when you think about it, this planet is almost nothing compared to the size of everything else in the universe. So, are you willing to accept that? Why? Because it's the truth. And that truth is where you should start, building your life on a real foundation. Then what? Imagine for a moment that you're willing to let go of the part of you that can't stand hearing these kinds of ideas. That part is called your ego. Your ego says things like, I'm important, I'm special, I'm good at what I do, I have money, I look good. But compared to what? Compared to the person next to you? The truth is, they're not really much either in the grand scheme. So we have to start there. If this feels uncomfortable, it's because there's a part of us clinging to a false idea that I'm very important and I matter deeply. But when you really look at it, all the things we think make us important don't really mean much in the big picture. Think about it. You arrived on this planet with nothing, and you'll leave with nothing. Need me to say it again? You came here empty-handed, with nothing at all. When you were born, you had nothing, not a single thing. And when you go, you're not bringing anything with you. That's the simple truth. So let's look at life for what it is. A baby was born, grew into an adult, and one day that person will die. And in between, what did they do? They worked, they fought, they worried, they got hurt. All that struggle while sitting on a tiny planet floating through endless space. Why do we do it? Maybe we do all this because we feel like there's something else to do with our lives. And maybe that's what it means to live in alignment with the truth. But you have to start by letting go of the ego. Stop thinking, how do I look? Or how do I make myself seem important? What is the ego, really? It's something we create to avoid facing the truth. The ego says, I matter. But compared to what? This idea of I matter is all relative. You might feel important next to someone else, but in comparison to the whole universe, to everything that's existed for 13.8 billion years, how much do you actually matter? So, this is where we begin. The ego doesn't want to accept that there's something much larger going on. It doesn't want to connect with that vast reality. Instead, it clings to, this is my body. This is who I am. This is how I look. But that's not really who you are. Think about it. At what age do you think you look like you? When you were a baby? When you were 5, 15, 30, 80? Which one is truly you? The truth is, you're much more than any single stage of life. And your life is part of something much larger. And that's where you have to start if you want to live in line with the truth. Thank you. The truth is, you are not what you look like. Think about it. You can't even choose which version of yourself is you. Are you the child, the teenager, the adult? You're actually in here, behind it all, and you don't have a face. In the Zen tradition, there's a riddle, or koan, that they give to students. What was your face before your mother was born? It's a strange question, but it helps us realize that our true self is not about our appearance or the identity we think we have. Have fun thinking about that. It's like realizing you don't really have a face at all. You're actually consciousness. You're like a light that shines on things without becoming them. If the light shines on something beautiful, it doesn't make the light beautiful. If it shines on something broken, it doesn't make the light broken. The light is just aware of what's there. It isn't affected by it. Similarly, you are the consciousness that's aware of the face you see in the mirror. But you are not the face itself. You are the one observing it. You're aware. But when you're here in this world, it's easy to forget and start believing you are what you see. Why? Because deep down, you don't know who you really are. So you start inventing a version of yourself. Think of how we change to fit others' expectations. You go on a date, and if you really like the person, you might try to act in a way that makes them like you too. You think, I'll be whatever you want me to be. But who's talking here? Why do we feel like we need to be whatever someone else wants? This is a sign we've made up an idea of who we are, and we keep changing it depending on the situation. Look back on your life. The you that played with toys as a child isn't the same as the you who deals with adult responsibilities. But here's the thing. You, the consciousness inside, haven't actually changed. What has changed is what you're looking at and experiencing. Consciousness itself doesn't change. It evolves in understanding. When we say that consciousness evolves, it means you start to understand more about who you really are. You learn that you're not the person you see in the mirror or the roles you play. You are like the light that shines on things without becoming them. Imagine consciousness as a light shining on a beautiful diamond like the Hope Diamond. It doesn't matter if the diamond is taken away or if a flaw is found in it. The light itself isn't affected. You are like that light. Whatever happens to the things you observe, whatever flaws they have, doesn't change who you really are. You are the one watching, the awareness itself. And that truth doesn't depend on what you're looking at. So, evolving spiritually and growing into a more evolved being means learning to step back from everything you're aware of. Think about it. You notice your thoughts. You're aware of your emotions. You see your body, and you're conscious of everything around you. Right? So, who is the one doing all that noticing? True spirituality isn't about what's happening outside of you. It's not about your body, your thoughts, or your feelings. Those are just things you're aware of. They don't define you. Think back to when you were 12. You can still remember the emotions you felt back then, right? Or maybe you recall some thoughts you had just yesterday. The you that was aware of those thoughts and feelings back then is the same you who is aware of them now. This awareness doesn't change. It stays the same, but it becomes more understanding and aware over time. It doesn't become better because it's already complete. It's already as perfect as it can be. This consciousness, this awareness, is already perfect. It's like a spark of the divine. Some might call it God, or the essence of God. But here's the funny part. This part of God consciousness, this perfect awareness, has become so wrapped up in what it's observing that it thinks it is those things. It believes it's the thoughts, the body, the emotions. For example, when a thought pops up, your mind says, I am that thought. You might think, oh no, how could I think that? I'm embarrassed. I hope nobody knows I had that thought. What's happening here? You're watching a thought go by, and then you start identifying with it. You feel ashamed, worried, or anxious about a thought. But it's just a thought. Imagine a thought passes by saying, I'm so smart. I just solved this problem. Or another thought says, I'm so embarrassed I thought that. It's still just a thought that you're watching. You could be having positive or negative thoughts, but they're all just thoughts. They're separate from you. You're the one noticing them, not the one being them. When you understand this, you realize that pure consciousness is simply awareness. It's that feeling of I am aware. It's awareness noticing itself. But because we don't always know what to be aware of, we tend to latch onto things we see or feel. We start with our body, thinking, this is me, this is mine. Then, as we grow, we add layers to this identity, saying, these are my thoughts, my emotions, my life. Over time, we build an ego around these ideas, saying, I am this body, I am these thoughts, I am these feelings. But that's the big misunderstanding. It's not true. You are not what you're looking at. You're the awareness watching all of it. You're not the body you see, the thoughts that come and go, or the emotions that rise and fall. You're the one noticing these things. You're pure awareness, simply observing everything. But this awareness feels uncomfortable at times, and we feel lost without something to grab onto. So we grab onto the body first, claiming it as mine. Then, as we grow, we add more layers of mine to other things in our life. Our belongings, our relationships, our identity. Even as children, we start saying mine in the crib, holding on to things as mine. It's the same impulse, isn't it? All of this mine talk begins as we build our sense of identity. But when you step back and recognize that you're the awareness noticing these things, not the things themselves, that's when you begin to truly evolve spiritually. From the moment you were born, something inside of you has been aware. That awareness hasn't stopped, not for 1 hour. Over time, you just started to identify with different parts of yourself, like your thoughts, feelings, or body. But those aren't the real you. You created this idea of yourself in your mind, a made-up identity. You can change this identity whenever you want, because it's just something you created. It's not who you really are. The real you is the one who is aware of this made-up identity. This is called witness consciousness. Witness consciousness means you can take a step back and watch what's happening in your mind. Some people never realize this. They're so identified with their thoughts and feelings that they never step back to say, oh, I see what's going on in my mind. But when you do take that step back, that's witness consciousness. It's like saying, I am aware. I am watching my thoughts and feelings instead of getting lost in them. This awareness lets you see your ego, that part of you that always wants to prove how great it is, or that complains about everything. The ego often causes stress and conflict because it's always focused on itself. Some people think their ego is amazing, while others see it as a burden. With witness consciousness, you can see your ego for what it is. A pattern of thoughts, not the real you. But witness consciousness isn't the same as being fully enlightened. It's not even a high spiritual state. Why? Because in witness consciousness, you're still looking at yourself. You're just aware that you're observing yourself. There's a story of an old spiritual master who understood this deeply. His body was weak from age, and he needed help to stand up. Once, someone offered to help him, and he said, "Don't talk to me about this body. It's just a bundle of troubles, and the sooner I'm free of it, the better." He didn't see his body as himself. He was just watching it as something separate. Another enlightened master, Ramakrishna, referred to his body, mind, and emotions as this. He would say, "I don't know what this wants or what's wrong with this." To him, his ego and body were just this, something separate from his true self. He had gone beyond identifying with his body or mind at all. With witness consciousness, you are looking at yourself from a distance. This is helpful because you're aware that you're looking at yourself rather than being totally caught up in it. You're not trying to defend or make yourself look good. You're simply noticing what's happening inside of you. Now, ask yourself, do you often feel the need to defend yourself? When someone says something that bothers you, do you automatically feel you have to protect yourself? Witness consciousness means you notice this reaction. You see that part of you is offended. Maybe your heart starts racing, words start spilling out as you respond, and you're aware of all this, right until you lose it. Have you ever lost it? Losing it means you're so caught up in your emotions that you forget to stay calm and centered. You get swept away, and before you know it, you might say something you'll regret. You're no longer calmly observing. Instead, you're fully wrapped up in defending and arguing. This is when consciousness stops being centered, and you become lost in your reaction. Sometimes you come back to yourself and realize, "Whoa, what happened there?" With practice, you learn to stop losing yourself so easily. This is what spiritual growth is about. The soul, your true self, is always steady, but it often gets tangled up with things that come and go like emotions or ego. Eventually, you reach a point where you can live more in truth rather than in the illusions of the ego. The ego isn't who you really are. It's just a collection of thoughts you hold on to, thoughts you protect and defend. These thoughts form a kind of image or concept of who you think you are. When you don't know your true self, you rely on this mental concept, this ego, built from your beliefs, likes, dislikes, and judgments. This mental image or self-concept is not your true self. It's just something you've made up, a set of ideas you cling to. But a concept isn't real. It's simply a story you've created about yourself. The truth of who you are doesn't need defending. It just is. The ego, however, feels fragile because it's not real, so it always needs to be protected. True freedom comes when you realize this and let go of needing to protect something that isn't the real you. The ego is not the real you. It's just a mask, something false. When someone asked Yogananda what the ego was, he called it the masquerading self. In other words, it's like a mask you put on, made up of all the thoughts you carry about yourself. You wear this mask because deep down, you're unsure of who you really are. You're not fully aware or enlightened, so you hold on to this mask of thoughts to feel secure. Everyone builds their own mask, which is why people think, feel, and act differently from each other. Have you ever thought, I'd never say or do something like that, when someone does something surprising? That's because they didn't build the same mask as you did. We all create our masks out of our unique experiences. If you had a good experience with someone named Sally, you might feel positively about people named Sally now. Or if you had a difficult experience, you might be wary in similar situations. Over time, you build this image of you based on all these past experiences. But this image of you is just a collection of experiences. It's not the real you. People say things like, you're the sum of your experiences. That means they think you are shaped entirely by what you've been through. But if you didn't have any of those experiences, you would still exist, wouldn't you? Think about your worst memory, or your best one. If it hadn't happened, you'd still be here, fully alive, conscious, and experiencing life. The experiences happened outside of you. They weren't you, yet you've built an identity around them. Imagine saying, I'm the person who lost a loved one, or I'm the one who got divorced. Are you defining yourself by experiences that hurt you? That's what happens when we cling to these events as part of who we are. It's natural to feel that pain, but letting it shape your identity keeps you stuck in the past. You existed before those things happened, and you still exist now. So why attach your sense of self to them? The reason we do this is that we're looking at ourselves through the lens of the ego. We rest on this image of ourselves to feel stable. But that's not who we truly are. Our consciousness or awareness is always present. But instead of focusing on our true nature, it gets caught up in these external experiences and ideas. This shift in focus, away from our deeper self and towards the ego, is like the fall from the garden. It's turning away from a sense of unity and wholeness within and looking outward, at the mask we created. If you let go of looking down at this mask and turn inward, you would find a deeper, more peaceful part of yourself. That's the true self, the one that doesn't need a mask, because it's already whole. Imagine you're sitting in a place where everything is connected, a universal consciousness, and you're watching your own mind at work. All that enlightenment really means is that you stop watching yourself like that, and instead let yourself blend back into this larger consciousness, like a drop of water merging back into the ocean. Meher Baba once described it as his own consciousness being a drop in the ocean, looking back at him until he let go, and it returned to the ocean. Find the part of you that's already done that, already dropped back into the ocean of consciousness. This merging is what people mean by union in yoga. It's about becoming one with everything, merging back into the truth that we all come from. Great spiritual teachers are those who have fully merged and returned to this source. But for most of us, we spend our lives focused on the separate thoughts we've created. These thoughts are like waves in the ocean, each one coming and going, often causing turbulence. Sometimes we become attached to our thoughts, like the idea that someone loves us but can't express it, or that someone didn't mean something they said. We create entire stories to fill gaps, making excuses, rationalizing, and convincing ourselves of what we think is true. But in the end, these are just made-up stories, patterns we cling to, even though they are only thoughts, not absolute truths. Our minds have always created stories. At one time, people believed the earth was flat, or that one group was inherently better than another. We create these ideas, and once others start to believe them too, they seem real. But they're just things the mind has made up. None of it is the ultimate truth. And yet, we often argue about which of these made-up beliefs is right, even though in reality, none of them are absolute. What's real is this: you are consciousness itself, just like everyone else. Beyond all our thoughts, we're the same. But we get caught up in thoughts, judging and comparing them, and this creates conflicts, big and small, all around the world. Even spiritual people sometimes think they have the right way of seeing things. But none of our thoughts are the absolute truth. They're just thoughts. Real truth doesn't change, whether you believe in it or not. For example, you're sitting on a planet in a vast universe, and your time here is short. No belief changes that. It's simply true. That's the kind of truth that doesn't need thoughts to make it real. It's not about you at all, and it's way bigger than anything your mind can fully grasp. When you start to understand that, it's almost funny. So then, the question becomes, how do you live in a way that reflects that truth? What if you could look at your own ego, those patterns and stories in your mind, and say, no thanks, I've been there, done that. Imagine reaching a point where you no longer spend your life focused on these made-up thoughts and ideas. Life is too short for that. You might do things like build a big house or put your name on something. But at the end of the day, does that really matter? Does it truly change anything or help anyone in a lasting way? Instead, you might realize, I may not know exactly what I'm supposed to do, but I do know what I'm not supposed to do. You don't have to fill your head with thoughts and beliefs, treat them as real, and then spend your life devoted to them. What's the alternative? Just focus on what's real. Are you here? Yes. Are you going to be here for a while? Yes. And sometimes you might feel joy or sadness, and that's okay. But what if you look beyond yourself? Is there something you can do, even a small thing, to help others? Not based on your beliefs or opinions, but on what's actually happening in the moment. This isn't about imposing your views on others, or assuming everyone should think like you do. That's often more harmful than helpful. It's about letting go of your made-up thoughts and being fully here, right now, in the moment that's unfolding. And because you're not distracted by endless thoughts and judgments, you're truly present and can see how to respond, maybe with a smile or a kind gesture, whatever feels right for that moment. This is what it means to be here now. You might think, can it really be that simple? But yes, it can. Being in the moment doesn't require opinions, expectations, or dreams. You're just fully there, with no need to make things fit your ideas. You're available to serve, to ask, what can I do to uplift this moment? You're not busy trying to make it be what you want, because that often causes tension. Instead, you let the moment be what it is and see if there's something you can do to help. As each moment unfolds, you don't need to control it. Life is always changing. No two moments are the same. Everything, every atom, every particle is constantly moving and shifting. So why hold on to fixed ideas, hopes, or opinions? Instead, a truly wise person is present, right here and now, serving however they can, with no need to take anything from the moment. If you don't need people to like you, to agree with you, or to fulfill anything for you, then you're truly free to help them. You're not serving your own needs. You're serving them. When was the last time you were fully in a moment without wanting something from it? Without fear or expectation? That's the real freedom of living in truth. To be fully present and available to give, without asking anything in return. We've built up this mental structure called the ego, a constant stream of thoughts about who we are and what we need. And from that place, we're always trying to shape the world around us to make it more comfortable, to fit what we want. Isn't that the truth? As humans, we're often lost in this mindset, deeply invested in our egos. We've learned that when things go our way, we feel good. And when they don't, we feel bad. If we think the future will be better, we feel relief. If we expect things to get worse, we feel anxious. But all this effort, all these thoughts, it's really all about us. It's about the mind-made structure we've built and labeled me. But what if we didn't have this constant focus on our needs and our ideas about how things should be? What would it mean to live in a way that's genuinely real? Because in truth, that entire structure, the ego, is built on an illusion. It can be hard to even talk about. But here's the foundation. It's not actually about us. Nothing is truly about this me we've created in our minds. There's no fixed me with specific needs and preferences. Instead, there's just awareness, an open consciousness experiencing reality as it is. And we didn't create this moment we're in. It's just here, happening before us. And no matter how hard we try, we can't stop it from unfolding in its own way. When we finally stop obsessing over ourselves, we can be present. We're no longer wrapped up in thoughts about how things need to be for us to feel okay. We're free to truly experience each moment and to respond to it, to help or serve as we're able. This isn't about being of service in some grand way. It's just naturally engaging with what's around us, without needing anything in return. And we don't need to see ourselves as special or spiritual for doing this either. Imagine thinking, look at me, I'm being so patient and kind. That's just the ego sneaking back in, using our actions to feel superior or to build a spiritual self-image. This spiritual ego is still just ego, wrapped up in ideas about how we should be or how others see us. What if we didn't need any of that? Trying to be impressive or to please others just builds more anxiety. When you put on a mask for others, you're constantly worried about maintaining it. You're not free because you're still tied to how people see you. The more you try to shape things to fit your needs, the more pressure you feel to keep that up. So, what does it mean to be real? It doesn't mean we get rid of the ego completely. The ego or sense of self is there. It's just part of being human, like having a body. Even enlightened beings have egos, but they don't live by it. When they're fully absorbed in the present moment, the ego fades away. When they come back from that deep awareness, the ego is still there, but it's not controlling them. So the goal isn't to completely erase the ego. Instead, it's about not letting it run the show. We can stop living through the constant demands of the ego and live in the present moment. We're not bound by our thoughts and desires, and we're free to simply be, to respond to life as it comes. When we do that, we experience a real kind of freedom. Think about your house. When you leave, it's still there, even though you're not interacting with it. You know it exists even when you're away. In a similar way, the ego is there. It's just part of being human. When we're in our body, living day-to-day life, the mind naturally builds a sense of self, even if it's a bit of a limited, made-up version of who we are. It's not the true self, but it's a concept we carry as we navigate the world. A truly enlightened person, like Christ, remains aware of their connection to everything, even as they interact with the world. They don't lose that deeper awareness of being part of the whole universe. They've reached a profound state beyond what we can fully understand. Consider the story of Yogananda, a great spiritual teacher who came to the United States in the 1920s. When he spoke to huge audiences, people would ask him, "Do you feel proud when you see all these people listening to you?" His answer was, "No, I don't feel pride." Instead, he described feeling his consciousness expanding in every direction, across the universe, while he was also connected with his own teacher Yukteswar on a higher plane. So, while he was in his body, speaking to an audience, he was also aware of existing far beyond that physical place. That's the state of an enlightened being. They feel connected to everything, everywhere, all at once. But here's the thing, even for enlightened beings, when they come back to everyday awareness, there's still a bit of ego. They still have some tie to the body and mind. For example, Meher Baba, another great master, would have a disciple check on him at night. If he wasn't wiggling his big toe, it was a sign he had left his body completely and might not return by morning. His connection to the body was that delicate. Now, don't worry, you're not likely to be in this situation anytime soon. But it shows that even when someone is deeply enlightened, there's still a small connection to the body, and thus a hint of ego remains. However, they're not attached to it. They don't see it as their true self. Yogananda once mentioned that even until his final days, he would experience preferences, things he liked and didn't like, but he wasn't attached to those feelings. He simply observed them. The great master Ramakrishna was asked, "Does an enlightened person feel anger?" Many people assume that anger is gone for enlightened beings. Ramakrishna said, yes, they feel anger, but it's like writing on water. The emotion comes, but it passes through instantly, leaving no mark. Imagine dipping your finger in water to write something. The letters disappear immediately. That's how emotions are for someone enlightened. So, an enlightened person still has experiences. If anger arises, it flows through them without getting stuck. They don't hold on to emotions, they don't resist them, and they don't identify with them as mine. For them, emotions come and go naturally, like waves in the ocean. It's not that they never feel anything, but they're free of the constant holding, suppressing an attachment that most of us struggle with. The emotion simply passes through, leaving them as clear and open as before. Fear, jealousy, insecurity, all of these are normal human emotions. When we talk about a fearless person, it doesn't mean they never feel fear. It means they aren't afraid of feeling it. For example, a brave warrior going into battle might feel fear, but it doesn't stop them. They can handle it and keep going. Fear, like all emotions, comes and goes, like writing on water. It's natural to feel all kinds of emotions. But the question is, can we handle them without letting them control us? The truth is, most of us can't. Instead of facing our feelings, we often end up trying to control everything around us. We start manipulating people and situations to make sure nothing triggers feelings we don't want to feel. We think, if I can just control everything, I won't feel uncomfortable emotions. This approach keeps us from fully living. If something happened in the past that hurt us, we might spend years doing everything we can to avoid feeling that way again, letting it shape our whole life. We end up building walls to protect ourselves, rather than letting ourselves experience life as it comes. So, what's the alternative? Instead of manipulating everything to avoid discomfort, we can choose to live with more openness. This way, we can actually experience life as it is, without constantly trying to protect ourselves. How do we start? One helpful approach is to wake up each day with an open attitude. You could say to yourself, today things are going to happen. Some might be hard and some might be so nice that I want to cling to them. But I'll let everything come and go without holding on too tightly. Instead of avoiding or controlling life, you let the day unfold and you deal with things as they come. It's not about being perfect. It's about deciding not to spend your life avoiding reality. You're no longer trying to control every single moment or person so that you don't feel certain things. Instead, you're learning to let go of the part of you that can't handle those feelings. This is the real spiritual path. Yoga and meditation can help. But the core of this journey is learning to release the part of you that feels threatened by life. Rather than trying to change the outside world to make things easier, you work on yourself from within. The goal is to become the kind of person who can handle whatever comes. Instead of thinking, how do I change everything around me so that I'm comfortable? Ask, how do I let go of the part of me that needs to control? When you work on that part, you start to live in truth, in reality, without constantly trying to protect yourself. This is the essence of the spiritual path. It's an inner journey, freeing yourself from the need to control life and learning to accept it as it is. Instead of holding on to every disappointment and frustration, start letting go of the part of you that can't handle things not going your way. For example, if you're hurt because something didn't turn out how you wanted, don't store that inside. Let it pass. But how do you get there? Start by practicing with small things. You don't need to dig up huge old memories or dive deep into why you felt hurt as a kid. Sure, understanding those things can be helpful, but that alone won't solve everything. Working on this is more like learning a new skill, like tennis or playing the piano. You won't be perfect at it right away, but you can get better with practice. Most of us aren't very good at handling things as they are. Instead, we often try to control the people and situations around us so that we don't have to face uncomfortable feelings. But imagine if you shifted focus and practiced handling reality just as it is. Start with the small stuff that's out of your control anyway. For instance, let's say you're annoyed that it's raining and you have to get out of your car and walk in it. Instead of letting the rain bother you, try saying, "All right, it's raining. I'll just get wet." Practice letting things go with these little inconveniences, rather than letting them build up inside and add stress to your day. Or maybe you're planning a camping trip, and you're worrying because the forecast calls for rain. You're already getting upset over something that might not even happen. Instead, catch yourself and say, "If it rains, I'll make new plans. I can handle that." Practice seeing that you don't have to get worked up over things you can't control, especially things that haven't even happened yet. Handling life is a skill. Just as with any skill, you won't be great at it right away. But with time, you can get better at it. Little by little, you'll find that you're not as bothered by the small, everyday frustrations. You'll learn to face what's in front of you without needing to control everything around you. That's how you grow, one small practice at a time. Remind yourself, "I can handle it." Let that be your mantra, repeating it every time something feels like it might overwhelm you. When your mind starts spiraling, "But what if this happens?" Or, "What if that goes wrong?" Just calmly say, "I can handle it." This isn't just talk, it's a practice. Start with the small things. Instead of letting yourself get frustrated with little things that drive you crazy, like the weather or a slow driver in front of you, see those moments as practice. Some people might say, "Oh, those are just small annoyances. Life's real problems are bigger than that." But if you can't handle these small things, how can you expect to handle bigger challenges? You wouldn't try to compete against world-class athletes if you've never even practiced, right? It's the same with handling life's bigger moments. So, when someone is driving too slow or the traffic is at a standstill, ask yourself, can I handle this? Instead of getting worked up, take it as an opportunity. Play some music, do some breathing exercises, recite your mantra. Do whatever helps you stay calm, but don't let yourself start complaining or feeling helpless. Think of these moments as practice for strengthening your ability to stay steady. Living truthfully means being able to handle reality as it is, not as we want it to be. In each moment, there's a truth about what's happening, and if we practice accepting and working with that truth, we're training ourselves to live peacefully. Everyone can get better at this, no matter where they're starting from. Most of us spend a lot of energy trying to control our surroundings, to keep ourselves comfortable, like a child throwing a tantrum if they don't get their way. Think about it. How many times do we let our egos make demands? I don't like this. This isn't fair. Or I deserve better. The ego constantly wants everything just right. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it throws a fit. The more you let it do that, the more it controls your life. Learning to handle each moment means that when life presents something uncomfortable, you accept it without needing to resist or change it. Instead of trying to change every situation, you focus on changing your reaction to it. You don't need to renounce anything or make grand gestures. You just need to meet each moment as it is. The more you do this, the more peace you'll find because you won't be wasting energy on resisting or worrying. When you're truly able to handle each moment as it comes, the ego no longer runs the show. You can live at peace and focus on living with purpose and serving others. When you learn to handle things in life, it's like driving on the road and not being bothered by the white lines or all the trees you pass by. Those things don't stick with you, right? You're not lying in bed at night thinking about the white lines on the highway. They're just part of the journey. They don't distract you. It's only when something really bothers you, or you make a mistake, that it sticks in your mind. The same thing happens with the ego. When you're constantly focused on things that bother you, it's like being tethered to them. Your attention is locked on every small annoyance, and it keeps you from experiencing peace and happiness. But as you learn to handle more and more of what life puts in front of you, these little things stop being such a big deal. The more you let go of those distractions, the more you naturally feel uplifted, freer, and more joyful. When you stop being so absorbed in what annoys or worries you, you start to feel lighter. The self isn't staring at the ego anymore because there's nothing there to distract it. You become untethered, meaning you're not tied down by little worries, judgments, or irritations. This allows you to experience a natural sense of joy and love. You don't have to work hard to feel this. It just flows into you as a result of letting go of what was holding you down. So, what does it mean to live truthfully? It means learning to handle each moment as it comes, letting go of the need to control everything around you, and not letting little things keep you down. As you do this, you find a deeper, more beautiful way of being. You're no longer focused on what you need or want. Instead, You feel a natural urge to reach out and serve others. You help, not because you feel obligated or want something in return, but because there's nothing else you need. With a heart free of distractions, serving others becomes the most natural, joyful thing to do. Thank you for listening.